This video shows the results of overnight video filming on Yellowbelly Creek, which is well inside the Vulcan State Forest. This is part of a systematic survey of platypus, rakali and other native fauna species in the upper reaches and headwaters of the key river systems in the southern part of Oberon local government area, which is being undertaken by Oberon Citizen Science Network over the course of 2025. The video is captured by a custom do-it-yourself camera, which is designed, assembled and being continuously improved by OCSN members. The cameras use specialised low-light camera sensors with invisible 850 nanometer infrared illumination, which is completely invisible to all mammals. So although these scenes look well lit in the videos, in fact to humans and animal eyes they're quite black or dark. Now in the next slide we'll just see one of the cameras. This is in position on Yellowbelly Creek in the lower position that we filmed overnight, showing that the creek is actually quite flat here and rather shallow over riffles, and that's the same camera looking upstream along the Yellowbelly Creek. And then in the next slide we'll see what that looks like as captured by the camera. So this is the video that's captured at that point. And this is the other camera, which is about 150 meters further upstream. And you can see looking down over a pool. The stream actually runs through a log. And there's a close-up of the camera, and you can see the log in the background. And the stream actually runs up through those reed beds further up into the forest. And this is what the camera sees at that point. You can see that a deep pool and the larger pool beyond. So we'll start off now at about 7:45 on the 28th, and this is the lower monitoring point. And you can see an antechinus hops across. So here's a slow motion replay. This is probably a yellow-footed antechinus, but it could be an agile antechinus. It's a little bit hard to tell from the video, but it's definitely one of the antechinus species. And you can see how very athletic they are. Now we've skipped ahead quite a bit, so it's just before 10 p.m. and here's another antechinus, a different one. So this is clearly a common crossing point for antechinuses on this part of the creek. You can see it's raining. And here's a rakali heading upstream. And it's just about 11 past 11. But then if we swap to the other camera, and here it's 13 past 11, we can see the same rakali about 150 meters further upstream. It's taken a few minutes to arrive here at this deeper pool, and you can see it immediately starts to feed quite vigorously. It's a little bit hard to see in the video, but the pool is actually full of native freshwater fish, galaxid species, possibly mountain galaxias. We haven't fully identified the species, or probably several species, which we'll do at a later date. This is at double speed, but just to give you an impression of how vigorously the rakali moves around and feeds on the fish in this pool. In the interest of time, we'll speed ahead at increased rates. So you can see at the bottom of the screen and indicate the speed that it's playing back, just so you can observe the rakali activity over the several minutes that it spends up here. We think this footage is actually quite instructive, and we haven't actually seen much similar footage of rakali feeding in the natural environment, completely undisturbed. Now, if you watch closely, the rakali actually heads upstream at the bottom left of the frame. Bit hard to see, but we'll have a close-up slow motion replay. And if you look carefully, you can see it climbing up or clambering up that little waterfall, which is just out of the frame. There it goes. Okay, so that was just before, just after 11, but we've now jumped ahead to 2:30 a.m. And if you watch carefully at the lower left, the platypus comes downstream, surfs right off the little waterfall, and starts to feed in the deep pool. Now, the platypus don't eat the small fish, but rather they disturb the mud on the bottom and looking for insects and possibly small crustaceans and so on. So as the platypus feeds, you can see that it actually makes the water quite turbid. It shakes up a lot of the mud on the bottom of the creek. We've alternately sped up and slowed down this video back to normal speed. It's indicated at the bottom in the center, just so you don't have to sit through the dull bits while we're waiting for the platypus to resurface or come back into view. You might notice that it's possibly a little bit shy. I mentioned before that the infrared light is invisible, and that's true, but the actual infrared lamp shows as 6 little very dull red dots, which the platypus may have noticed and may be a little bit wary about, but we don't think it's actually disturbing the animal particularly. As you can see, it's not vacating the area, it's still feeding in this pool over an extended period. And this is very fast, just to show how long it stays here and how much activity it engages in while feeding. Now, at 20 times speed, it's a little bit too fast to see exactly what the platypus is going, but you get an impression of its activity. So we'll just slow the video down to 4 times speed, so you can just see exactly what it's doing a little bit better. So you'll notice the time now, it's about 4 minutes to 3 a.m. So the platypus arrived about 2:30 a.m. And it's about to leave in a minute or so. So altogether, it's stayed in this pool and has gone back and forth, feeding in the mud at the bottom for nearly 30 minutes. All right, we've transferred back to the lower camera. and it's about 2:41 a.m. and you can see just in the foreground a frog is hopping across the scene. We thought we should include this. Now we've transferred back to the upper camera and it's now 16 minutes past 3 a.m. and a platypus comes down again. It's probably the same platypus. I'm not absolutely sure we saw it go up and then come back down, but it probably is. Now you can see there its bill grinding action as it grinds up the insects or other things that it's found to eat. Platypus don't have teeth, but they have grinding plates. And we'll show that grinding action again in another segment later. The other thing to notice, of course, is that platypus swim mainly using their front legs, and the rear legs are just used as rudders. Now, if you watch carefully at the lower left, just to the right of the timestamp, you'll see that the platypus actually clambers up through the reed bed as it heads upstream. So it's actually left the pool. And then in the next section, we can see clouds of turbidity, of mud being thrown up by the platypus as it's feeding in the reed bed slightly upstream. And that turbidity washes down, and then the platypus surfs back down into the pool, having roodled round in the reed bed just out of frame to the left. Now at this point you can see the platypus grinding up what it's found in its bill, and you can see it grinding away there. We'll zoom in for a closer look, and you can clearly see it grinding the insects that it's collected between the plates of its bill. So once again, this platypus has spent nearly half an hour feeding in this pool, having gone upstream and then come back down again. And you can see on the log there's an antechinus just crossing, with the platypus playing in the river underneath, on the creek underneath. Okay, so having spent over half an hour again feeding in this pool, you'll see that the platypus heads upstream. It's a little bit hard to see it actually going up the waterfall, but we believe that's what happens, just at that point there. And then we've sped up the next bit because as it feeds in the reed bed just further upstream, you can see clouds of turbidity being washed down as it rootles around in the mud upstream. So it's now just after 4 a.m. and we'll skip forward at 200 speed. And again, you can see that the platypus has come down and it's flitting around and it's gone upstream again. Lots of turbidity being washed up. So this gives you an impression of just how active the platypus are and how vigorously they feed for quite extended periods because they have very high food needs. So it's now 4:18. The platypus has just come downstream yet again. We'll speed it up as it flits around. Now at this point we'll just swap back to downstream. It's now 4:21, and if you watch very carefully, you'll see the platypus coming downstream in this shallow section. So this is about 150 meters further downstream. So this is the same platypus that we just saw 3 minutes earlier upstream, and it's arrived down here. Now interestingly, you can see that it gets to this point and it appears to turn around and go back upstream. We're not quite sure why. It may have been slightly spooked by the slightly glowing red eyes of the infrared light as it came downstream and decided to turn back, or whether that's what it wanted to do anyway. So we'll head back upstream. So this is again a few minutes later. And here's the platypus that we saw went downstream, got to the shallow section where we were filming 150 meters downstream, turned around and came back up. And again, we'll skip forward at a fast rate. And you can see lots of turbidity. It's now 4:36, and platypus is coming downstream again. And we'll skip ahead at very high speed. Forgive this slight editing error. We've jumped back and forward in time slightly. So it's now 4:45 a.m. And here we show detail of the platypus clambering up the little waterfall, and we're back to speeding ahead. We just passed 5 a.m. and coming up to 6, and you can see more turbidity, more activity. And here's another frog. This is downstream. And here we are at 5:20 a.m. and the rakali, we don't know if this is the same one, but maybe, that we saw before, is now heading back downstream. Here we are at 5:20 a.m. the upstream, and we've just jumped ahead until 6. And you can see the platypus has returned and starts feeding in this pool yet again. So this is the downstream section, 150 meters downstream, also just before 6 a.m. And there's another antechinus. And once once again you can see how athletic they are in the characteristic hopping motion. It's definitely an antechinus, not a mouse or a rat, because its tail is about the same length as its body. And you can see the rounded ears, which if you look carefully are bilobed, which are completely characteristic of the antechinus, which is a native marsupial mouse. And it moves with a characteristic marsupial hopping motion. It's certainly not a kangaroo, but it moves in hops rather than scurries. Okay, we're now back upstream again. It's just coming up to 6 a.m. and the platypus appears again coming upstream. So we'll skip ahead, and you can see it's actually gone upstream. We missed where it actually clambered up, and there's a lot of turbidity coming down. So it's now just after 6. It looks blue because we've moved into the auto color balance mode because it's morning or it's about to be light, and you can see a platypus just came downstream. So it's the same one that went upstream, caused turbidity, and then has popped back downstream. And we can see an antechinus. We have a slow motion replay crossing the creek at this point using some handy branches as a bridge. And it's 6:13 a.m. in the morning, and the platypus appears yet again. We'll just skip forward a little bit, fast forward, and then if you watch very carefully, it's a bit hard to see, it actually clambers upstream. So not much else happens, so we'll just fast forward at 200 speed as the sun comes up, and you can see it gradually get lighter and lighter, and with the reflections on the water, but we don't actually observe any other animal activity until filming stops at 8:30 a.m. But we won't show all of that. We'll just show what it looks like as dawn breaks. You can see it's still raining. Okay, so we moved the one of the cameras to the same pool. This is the upstream pool, but facing the other direction. So you can see the reed bed and the waterfall that we saw right at the extreme left of the frame previously. And this is what this camera sees in this position. So this is at about 7:30 p.m. On the same night, on the 30th. And we'll just skip forward nearly an hour to about 8:22. And there we can see a platypus appearing and plopping down the waterfall. Let's do a half speed close up, and you can see it sort of hides a little bit under the log and then flops down the waterfall. So it's clearly spent most of the day in a burrow further upstream, deeper into Vulcan State Forest, and then it's coming downstream to feed. And you might have seen that, but there was a second platypus coming downstream. So this is at 8:24, We've not seen a platypus go upstream, so two have come downstream from further into Vulcan State Forest. So there's clearly more than one platypus here, and they're living upstream of this point, quite deep in Vulcan State Forest. So we've skipped ahead again. It's now just about 10 to 9, and yet another platypus appears to come downstream. So unless we missed anything, and it's very hard to see how platypus could get past this point without them being observed, it seems that at least 3 platypus, and this one appears to be quite a lot smaller than the others, have come downstream, having spent the day upstream on the Yellowbelly Creek in Vulcan State Forest. We'll just jump ahead a little bit. It's now about 5 minutes to 9. And you can see this is at 4 times speed, and you can see that there's a platypus feeding in the pool. A little bit hard to see it from this angle, but you'll see it appear now and then. So at this point, we'll just jump ahead a bit. And it's now about 9:30, and we can see an antechinus scurrying up the log. And then we'll speed forward a bit. It's now 9:36, and we can see a platypus come down, and this appears to be the small platypus. It's considerably smaller than the other ones we've seen, and it swims around a little bit. At half speed, you can see once again it sort of peeks out from under the log and then plops down. So this is presumably a juvenile, which is encouraging. So that's the same scene again. And again, apologies for these editing mistakes, but it's nice to see a juvenile platypus having fun. So we'll speed ahead a few minutes. So it's now about 20 to 10. And there's the small platypus reappearing in this pool. Okay, now it's about quarter to midnight. And an antechinus hops past. You can see it quite clearly, and you can see the rounded bilobed ears. Very cute. And then a little bit later, it goes back again. About 15 minutes later, it goes back along the same path. So on the same evening, we placed our other camera yet further downstream. So this is just before a causeway where the creek goes under a road in an attempt to try to film rakali and platypus negotiating this section. As you can see, it's quite shallow. I think this is an artificial bottom made when the causeway was constructed. In fact, we filmed here all night and didn't see any animals at all. But jumping ahead to about 20 to 10, just look at the water and you'll notice something quite distinctive. So this is at 75 times speed. And you notice waves of turbidity appearing as clouds in the water. And we can only interpret this as platypus feeding just upstream from here. Unfortunately, we can't see them and they didn't come downstream. But we interpret this as just around the corner there are platypus feeding in the mud and causing these waves of turbidity, which I think is quite nice to see. Okay, in summary, we've observed that at least one rakali is moving up and down this section of Yellow Belly Creek, which is a considerable way into Vulcan State Forest, and it's feeding vigorously on native galaxid fish, which appear plentiful in the creek at this point. And we've seen what appears to be at least one adult platypus and at least one juvenile platypus, possibly two, feeding in the upstream pool that we filmed. And they appear to have spent the day of the 29th of March in burrows even further upstream and upslope in the state forest. In future videos, we'll attempt to determine how far upstream they go or exactly where they live. And finally, we're able to observe waves of turbidity passing downstream, almost certainly caused by platypus feeding nearby upstream. And this is a phenomenon we've not seen on video before. We think it may be the first time it's documented. So we will be continuing our efforts in surveilling platypus, rakali and other native wildlife in the upstream areas of the key rivers south of Oberon Township. And I'd urge you to visit our website, the URL shown, and also in the YouTube link for more information.